how Jewish people get involved in these groups and why they get involved in these groups goes back to what Rabbi Singer said about the sleight of hand. I think he would agree that it's changed from 40 years ago when he started, where it was just changing, Jesus's name to Yeshua and saying Brit Chadashah instead of New Testament. And it was like basic change of the language. It's become much more sophisticated now, where their websites used to be very open. They've changed it so that now it looks much more kosher. They've changed their language. We're working from very different vocabulary. What Jewish people think certain words mean completely different things to a Christian. I know Rabbi Singer refers to it as a dog whistle. When we hear harvest, we don't think the same as a Christian when they say the word harvest. When they say restoration, that sounds nice to a Jew, and we think that's great. But restoration to a Christian means a very different thing. That means bringing back, Jesus in the second coming. When they say fulfilling prophecy, we are all for fulfilling prophecies also. But again, they refer to it as the second coming. When they talk about one new man theology, they talk about standing with the people of Israel and supporting the people of Israel and becoming one, and we're all together, and it's sort of a kumbaya, nice message that the Jewish people think is so great and so nice. But the vocabulary is very different, and I don't think the Jewish people are aware of that. And I think that's where I started to realize that the Jewish people are innocently and naively getting involved in these groups and openly embracing them to crazy, insane levels, and trusting people that they just don't realize what the real intention and what the real meaning behind those words and that theology is. And that's how they're succeeding. I'd like to think that it's not with ill intentions, but that they're just not aware. And that's a lot of what we do, is we work with government leaders, Jewish organizations, and try to explain to them, which they insist, no, they're not proselytizing. That's not their agenda. But when they speak to Jewish audiences, they speak very differently than they do among the church. When I came to Judaism, I couldn't believe that Jewish people partnered and embraced them so openly, because I thought, how do you not know that? But that's because I was in the church, and they speak openly behind closed doors. They talk about the methods that they're using and how they're doing it, and they brag and boast about their successes and how many people they brought to Jesus. So that is basically the work of Beyneynu, and what we've done is go find those videos where they're speaking openly among themselves, when they're doing their fundraising. Thank God they're reliant on funding from America, from their supporters, so they have to show their supporters that they're succeeding. There's a big competition for the evangelical dollar. All the evangelicals give a tremendous amount of money in order to convert Jewish people. So each organization that's operating here, targeting the Jewish people, has to prove that they're in more than the others, that they have more contact, they have government approval, they have more people on the ground, and they're making a bigger impact, and that helps them get more funding from the evangelicals that are supporting them. So it's those videos where they're speaking openly and talking about what they're doing that is often shocking when you bring that to Jewish leadership, who's insistent that they're working with really good people who have no agenda. And once they do discover that agenda, a lot of organizations have had a positive response and severed those relationships. We had a big case with Jewish Agency, which they were completely unaware that the organization that they had handling their lone soldiers and New Olim were actually missionizing. But through those fundraising videos and contact daily with their supporters, they exposed themselves, and we were able to encouraged Jewish agency when they did the right thing. They severed that relationship, and that no longer is happening. God TV was one of the first cases that we took on as a formal group, Beyneynu. They openly talked about how they wanted to share the gospel in every home in Israel, and that they had gotten a license to do that in Hebrew, and it was the first time in history that was allowed. And we created a video of they had several videos. We created a video just taking out the relevant pieces that we thought the Jewish people needed to know, and it was shocking. That video went viral, and it made news all around the world, and it really upset a lot of people. The same thing happened in 2006 with Daystar TV. And I'll read you a part of an article. Marcus Lamb, of one of the Daystar president, was he had said that when they first applied for the license, that it was the government had a question. They weren't sure how it was going to be received. The quote he said is, he says, "The license for the full-time channel will reach every home in Israel. It's going to be preaching the gospel 100% of the time." He said, "The license we've been issued is on a trial period for 6 to 9 months because they have, they wanted to gauge the response of the Orthodox public. They weren't sure how it was going to go over. But the trial that they did reassured the officials that no editing was going to be necessary because they hardly got any complaints. All they got was good and positive responses." And that was shocking to me when I saw that old article, because that means nobody spoke up. Nobody said anything. And if we had done the same thing as we did during God TV, if Orthodox people had spoke up, if Jews around the world spoke up, this is one of the things that unites, the secular Jew, the Orthodox Jew. Jews across the spectrum are affected by missionaries, and this is something that we can join together and actually unites us. And if we had spoken up in 2006, when the government knew that it was probably going to be a problem and people probably weren't going to like it so much, but because nobody did speak up, people like you and I, who are familiar with this, when we see the red flags before anybody else does, we know the language and the background. And sometimes it's somebody that's come from the same background and us, and they're completely kosher and they're on this journey just like we are. But sometimes they're not, and it's important to take that to Jewish leadership. And I think the rabbi has told Jewish leadership, when you have somebody in your midst that's a convert that has been in that world, don't ignore the red flags. When they tell you that there's a problem, listen to them. Every covert missionary that has been exposed has been somebody who just paid attention to the red flag. They went to Jewish leadership and said, I know that from the I know that person from the congregation that I was in, or I had a strange conversation and they mentioned things that I know are from the church. And then that allows the leadership to confront them. And maybe there's an explanation, but they need to be brought in and asked questions. Jewish identity, they've stopped going through the conversion process. It used to be that the Beit Din were, concerned about people trying to get through the conversion process, and they would find ways to not answer the questions, and the Beit Din wasn't prepared for those deceptive answers. But they've stopped doing that. Now they just come in and pretend to be Jews. They come in dressed like a chassid, and Jewish people, rightfully so, think they're Jewish. They come in with a black hat and learn daf yomi with the rabbi for 6 months, and then ask for a letter for recommendation to make aliyah. People were horrified that Michael Elk was able to get smicha. And how did he did that? Because it never occurred to anybody that a Christian would apply for a smicha program. That wasn't on the radar of Jewish people. That was just absurd. But now we do have to be aware of that. We do have to have our guard up and be mindful and recognize it, and not be afraid to ask the questions. Asking somebody their background. We walk into a room and we play Jewish geography, and you find out people all over the place. The Jewish world is very small. When something stands out and the background doesn't quite make sense, or things don't add up, don't be afraid to ask those questions. Especially Jewish leadership needs to not be afraid to ask those questions. Jewish identity, you have to give proof of Jewish identity to make Aliyah. We have a whole file of paperwork and visas and ins and outs. You have to answer a lot of questions. And those questions need to be asked. And it's unfortunate that we have to have our guard up, but the Jewish people have been used to this for centuries.